First of all, we are in the Thanksgiving weekend, so it's very appropriate to be expressing our gratitude to these teachings that has come from the ancient times till the recent times. It has been made fresh every time by all the great sages who have lived it and who have transmitted it. And also, right now, when we are engaging with it, it is fresh as it comes right now. The beauty of these teachings is that it is both most ancient and most new. There is a nice expression that is referring to Krishna, which is the essence of truth. It says, Purana Purusham cha Nava Yavvanam cha. It says he is the most ancient being and the most youthful. And that refers to the teaching, the truth, the essence of being itself. Because it is timeless, it is both most ancient and most fresh. And that freshness is what we explore now in this satsang, as in every satsang. When we meet together and when we engage with the teaching, we are not engaging to confirm the knowledge we have or to acquire more knowledge, but to look at it fresh and thereby recognize the truth of our own being now. The entire Gita is spoken for Arjuna, who represents all of us. In fact, the discussion of Gita is said to be between Nara and Narayana. Narayana is Krishna, the embodiment of the supreme truth, and Nara is the human, the embodiment of all humans, represented by Arjuna. The conflict faced by Arjuna is the conflict faced by everyone at various levels, which is essentially what is right action and how to live and act in this world without being caught in bondage and thereby suffering. Because action is always happening at various levels and they seem to always cause bondage of some kind. So Arjuna was paralyzed, not knowing what to do. It is an intense case of paralysis because of the intensity of the action that was in front of him, which was to engage in war with his own relatives in order to protect the kingdom. So he had the duty towards the kingdom, the citizenry, but he had the attachment towards his relatives. And he felt a terrible conflict, and therefore he sought the wise counsel of Krishna. And the entire discourse of Gita happened on the battlefield of Mahabharata, which is recorded by Vyasa. And we are now in the last chapter of it. Krishna took Arjuna through a journey of the entire landscape of wisdom, devotion, meditation, through which he spoke of what is right knowledge, right action, the essence of the all-pervading Supreme, which was given to him as a vision through the Vishwarupa Darshana, that which pervades every single atom of the universe as the one non-dual being was revealed to him. And then after all this, we have come to the final chapter where Arjuna finally asks a question, which is the essence of the question that faces him, and he wants a final answer to it, which is, what is the right way to renounce and thereby be free? So, the first important point to recognize is that freedom is not something to get, but it is something that is there already by letting go of the false. That's why this chapter is called Moksha Sannyāsa Yoga. It means liberation through letting go. Sannyasa means renounce, and to renounce is to let go. The important thing to highlight here is when we say the word sannyasa, immediately, because of cultural context, one may envision living the life of a monk as a sannyasi. But neither is Krishna a sannyasi, nor is Arjuna a sannyasi, nor was even Vyasa a sannyasi. They were all householders, having responsibilities and engaging in them, and yet spoke of highest sannyasa. So, the first important thing to recognize is that letting go is not about changing one's name or one's position or one's situation, but it is an attitude of living. So, that's what Arjuna asks, and we had one session where we looked at it. To recap, Krishna said there are two types of renunciation: outer renunciation and inner renunciation. Outer renunciation is that by which we let go of actions which are not necessary. He calls it kamyanam karmanam. So, actions that are propelled by self-centered desire has to be let go. If we engage in actions which are propelled by the notion of what's in it for me, then that will always cause bondage in any realm, whether it be in a relationship, at home, at work, at all levels. Unfortunately, most actions are propelled by the motive of what's in it for me. So the driver becomes, how can I gratify myself? And such actions will always cause bondage because it divides. We are then using the other person or the situation only as a means to an end, which is our own self-centered gratification. So this is a very simple yet most powerful pointer first to recognize how we relate to others. It begins with very simple things as how we listen to a conversation, how we engage with even a stranger on the street or the most intimate person in our life. Do we listen to them? Do we give attention to them fully and respond out of that? Or are we just looking at them as a way to get what I want? And the wanting can be in different ways. Broadly, as it has been defined, there are four types of wants. One can be simply wanting wealth and all kinds of wealth. It is not just money, but it can be power, it can be fame, it can be flattery, it can be validation. All of this, looking for that. It can be pleasure. One can look for pleasure, which is a very common failing of the ego. Pleasure means to use the memory of past experience and to relive those experiences by seeking to repeat what has happened, which is typically what pleasure is. I remember something as having given some happiness and now I again recreate it. That is, in fact, the key difference between joy and pleasure. Something that comes unsought is true joy. But when we seek it, it's a pleasure movement, and that pleasure movement always divides. Then one can seek to, in terms of wanting, so we spoke of wealth, we spoke of pleasure, then there can be a wanting for what one considers to be righteous living. So one may be caught in a particular cause, particular ideology, think that's the right way to live, and then want that, and then look at others as a means to get that. And then finally, there is the idea of liberation itself, which again can become a personal, self-centered activity if we are simply looking at it as my liberation, my freedom, my salvation, and then we are again looking at others as a means to get that. So these are four broadly called as well known dharma, artha, kama, moksha. All of these four, when becoming a self-centered activity, propels actions in the wrong way. So Krishna says, give those actions up entirely by being aware of the inner attitude of trying to use others and things as a means to your own gratification, but simply let go of such actions. Then what remains? He says actions which are correct, or broadly he calls as yajna, dana, tapa. Yajna means sacrifice. So sacrifice again is a very interesting word. It doesn't mean just traditional idea of ritualistic sacrifice. That's only symbolic. True sacrifice, which is to make things sacred, is by not rooted in the me, but being present to what is and responding to what is out of that presence. When we truly remain present, free of this sense of me, or at least aware of the sense of me, then there is sacredness there. The sacredness is denied when we are caught in the ego, in the me. We can be in the most outwardly religious setting, we can be in a temple, we can be in a beautiful ashram, but if we are caught in the me, then the sacredness of the place is not felt. On the other hand, we can be even in a mall, we can be even in a crowded street, but if we are not caught in the sense of me, then we can be filled with love and see the miracle of life, which is an expression of God flowing every moment. So yajna is to be in this mode of sacrifice, which is to see the sacred every moment. Dana is to give then. Dana means to give. Give is a natural expression of being free of the me. When we are free of the self-centered motives within, then there is a natural response to what is, which results in action, which is of the nature of truly giving. The most important thing we give is then total attention. When we engage in any action, if we are caught in the me, then attention is divided. We focus on what's in the self, and therefore every activity is divided between the subject and the object, and the subject of the action becomes the central factor, and we focus on that, and we don't give our full attention to the person or the situation in front of us. So, to negate this false division is to give true attention. And when we give true attention, that attention is the greatest gift one can give to others. And out of that comes all other giving. We can give time, we can give money, we can give our effort. All of that comes from the primary giving of total attention. And the third he says is tapa, yajna, dana, tapa. Tapa means austerity. So that results in austere living. Austere living is to live simply, not engage in activities which are complicating lives, but simplify life and live an austere, sublime life. When we are engaged in complicated activities, many times what happens is we may acquire things which are not necessary, and then to maintain that we have to do more things. Complicating life always adds actions which are constantly driving us outwardly. When we simplify lives, then time becomes available for higher pursuits, for subtler aspects of life. So, this is what's encapsulated by simple living, high thinking. When we live simply, we can think high, we can then truly realize the purpose of life. So, Krishna says these three types of actions should not be given up, because many times there are those who prematurely give up all actions, including actions that are necessary in this way, taking an outer sannyasa, let's say, or simply walking away from responsibilities and just going into a cave or going into some forest or retreating somewhere. But wherever we go, we are always going to have relations with people, with things. We need to eat food, we need to live somewhere. All this requires the whole world. So we cannot just live in complete isolation. There is always relating in this world as long as the body is there. So it is by relating correctly that we live properly, not by trying to isolate ourselves. That's why Krishna says one cannot give up these actions of yajna, dana, tapa. To give them up or even try to give them up prematurely results in a lot of repression, and it results in unhealthy behaviors as well. Therefore, it's important to purify and make sacred the relations, the activities, through discarding the factor of me rather than trying to stop action altogether. Then, after this, Krishna also spoke about how even in these actions, the most important thing is to give up the desire for outcome. So, even when we engage in these actions, which are called broadly yajna, dana, tapa, that is, actions which are not self centered but which are coming forth out of love, attention, and care, there also one has to let go of the desire for outcome. So we may engage in an action with true care at any level, and yet if we are caught in the outcome, we have a strong desire for a particular outcome, even for the other person or for a situation, then that very attachment to the outcome becomes a bondage. So it's very important to, even in these actions, to not have any attachment to the outcome of any kind. So that's called as karma phala tyaga, to be free of the attachment to the fruit of the actions. Then we have the ability to accept everything as is. This acceptance is called as also prasada buddhi, that is, accept everything as divinely ordained and therefore be grateful for it. Because many times when anything happens, even despite the best effort, if something doesn't turn out the way it was expected, there may be a hidden reason behind it that can result in something much better later, which was not foreseen at all. The intelligence that operates, that makes everything happen, is far beyond what the mind can ever process. Therefore, there has to be a total recognition that the cosmic intelligence that makes actions happen and their results come about has its own perfect rhythm. And whatever it comes out to be is exactly what is ordained. So, this is the subtle art of not being resigned but also be fully accepting. That is, we engage in action with full vigor and enthusiasm, but do not have any problem however the results come. We accept it fully and then we respond to it fully as well. Acceptance is not resignation, it is a state of mind where there is no conflict, and out of this freedom from conflict, there is a total response to what is. So, Krishna then speaks about even in renunciation, in giving up, there are therefore three types of giving up. So now he moves to the aspect of the three gunas, which are known as sattva, rajas, and tamas. And these three gunas have effect in every realm, starting with the idea of giving up itself. So we'll now go into a set of verses which speak of the three gunas and how they affect various aspects of action. And to be aware of it is very essential, because then we can know what is operating and thus be free of it. So even in giving up, as already pointed out, if one gives up obligatory work, what is essential, then that is considered as giving up in the mode of ignorance, tamas. There is various works that are obligated at various levels, and one has to discharge them properly. Even taking care of the body is a lot of work. As we know the principle of entropy, if we don't do anything, if we don't move, the body starts decaying. So it's essential to look at the body as a gift of nature, and it is the vehicle through which this journey goes, and it has to be taken care with love. The attention and love is not just for others but for one's own body, one's own state of being. If we don't honor the body as sacred, then we will end up paying the consequence for it. So this has already been described in Gita before as to neither eat too much nor eat too little, neither sleep too much nor sleep too little. Have the middle way, as later Buddha also said, which is to live life in harmony and take care of oneself. So it starts with the body, relations, work, everything. If we give up the obligated work, and let's say we fixate on one particular thing and that's all we care about, then that is giving up in the mode of ignorance. giving up in the mode of rajas is, in fact, the one who is too narrowly focused on a particular achievement and he gives up everything for that. There are many we can see who have this way of giving up, which is better than the giving up in the mode of ignorance. In the mode of ignorance, one gives up things which are even essential for maintaining the body and starts eating unhealthy food and engages in unhealthy actions and so on. Whereas the one who is in the mood of rajas, he may have a particular goal. Let's say he wants the body to be fit, then he would give up all kinds of things for that purpose, but that becomes the only motivation. Or someone else may be engaged in a startup or a company and they are ready to sacrifice everything else for that, but that becomes the central driving factor because of which relationships are affected, health is affected, and so on. So, this kind of giving up, where one gives up only the that rather one focuses on one particular thing and gives up other things in an unhealthy way, is rajasic giving up. But true sattvic giving up is what is pointed out already, where we give up the two things as said. One is give up actions which are rooted in self-centered activity. And the second is, even in the right action, give up the desire for outcomes. So then Krishna pointed out the 5 types of agents which are there in action. When we engage in action, normally we think I am doing the action, but in reality, action is a product of various forces that are coming together. So those were described, they are called as the adhishthanam, which is the ground of action itself, which is the body. Then the instruments of action, which is called karanam. Then the agency, which is karta. Then the movement of energy, which is called cheshta. And finally, the divine destiny, which is called daivam. So all these 5 are there because we may think that I am engaging in action and I have to do this and that. So first thing to recognize is that actions are happening through a combination of factors. We already saw how the body itself, without which no action is possible, here that's referred to as the adhishthanam, the ground, and this body is a product of divine intelligence. So even simple things such as seeing, hearing, digesting, all of this happens on its own, and without that we cannot engage in any action. As someone said, if a healthy man has many goals, a sick man has only one goal: to become healthy. So all our goals and desires are all there only because the body is able to function in a healthy way. Without that, we cannot do any action. So there is the body, which is the ground of action. Then there is the instruments of action, which is all the limbs and the senses that we have. Then there is the energy, the prana, that moves, that has its own rhythm. And then there is karta, which is the agency. The agency is this spark that rises and says, I have to do this now. And then finally, there is daivam, which is the divine destiny, as already said, which finally determines the result. As a very well-known example, but it's applicable at all levels. If a farmer engages in agriculture, whatever effort he puts in, ultimately he is dependent on rain, which is the work of nature, which is daivam. So this is true at all levels. We may engage in any action, but there has to be an element of divine destiny that ordains what is meant to happen, and that unfolds on its own. We cannot worry about it. We just do our best and let it be. So then, having described these five causes, Krishna also pointed out that actions have three important things that are to be realized. One is knowledge. Without knowledge, we cannot engage in action. So there is the knowledge which has the triad of knower, known, and knowing. Jnana, Jnaya, Jnata, it is said. The knower, known, and knowing results in action. And that action itself has the doer, the action itself, and the doing. So the gunas we spoke of, the three gunas, have their effect even in all these realms. So the knowledge has three types of knowledge. The work itself is of three types. The agency, karta, is of three types. So now he goes into all of that. So knowledge, when it comes to what is knowledge in the mood of sattva, he says that knowledge by which one sees the all-pervading oneness of existence is sattvic knowledge. Sarva bhuteshu yena ekam bhavam avyayam ikshate. Avyayam means the imperishable, unchanging one is what is found in all. Avibhaktam vibhakteshu tadjnanam vidhi sattvikam. He says vibhaktam means apparently things are separated, but in reality they are not separate. So if you look at the whole universe, apparently there are different entities and different beings, but in reality everything is pervaded by the same energy. Even at a physical level, everything is energy that is vibrating in different frequencies, as people, as things, as animals, as all of it. So the common underlying factor is the energy which is coming forth from the same source, and it can have different expressions. So in our own body, there is apparently separation between the fingers, the toes, the stomach, the eyes, and different parts of the body, but it's still one unit which is functioning in harmony, even though there are apparently different parts. The whole universe is like that too. That is why it was given as Vishwarupa, the body of God. The body of God is the universe. So the whole universe, made of apparently many parts, is really one. And that knowledge is true knowledge. When that knowledge is there, action comes forth correctly. But the Rajasic knowledge is that which sees multiplicity. It says, oh, what are we talking about? There are so many different people here, and therefore there is just the idea of separation and multiplicity, and many philosophies have also come out of it. Even many dualistic religious philosophies come out of this idea of holding on to the separation as real. And then tamasic knowledge is even more dangerous, because that is the knowledge which takes some partial idea of the divine and projects it as the right understanding, and then holds on to it with certitude. Atattvartam alpam, he says, Krishna here. So, for instance, Shankaracharya gives a nice commentary that if someone says someone has an idea of God, and they have conceived of God through as an image or as a name, and then they just become militant about it, that kind of knowledge which we see in this world a lot is tamasic knowledge, where then they cause a lot of harm. So the sattvic knowledge comes forth as love, because we see the oneness of everyone underlying the multiplicity. So that's why it's beautifully said, avibhaktam vibhakteshu. There is apparent multiplicity. The apparent multiplicity is not denied, just as the various parts of the body are not denied, but there is an unity underlying that. Similarly, there is a unity underlying all of creation. To see that and to act out of that is to recognize and act out of love. Then we see, just as various waves of the ocean, each are different, but yet everything is same essence. Same with people, everyone is different, yet of the same essence. So we therefore celebrate the uniqueness and at the same time recognize the oneness. The Rajasic action is where one is caught in separation, and therefore this results in all the egoic actions that come about, the desire to achieve, to compete, to compare, to become more, better, wealthy, and just this constant manic progression towards self improvement. And self improvement in all ways, that is, one identifies the self as the body, and then therefore the improvement is simply in all realms, becoming richer, powerful, famous. All of that becomes a very self centered goal. That's Rajasic. But Tamasic is where one gets caught in a false idea of the divine and then uses that to perpetrate violence against others and so on. And that is exactly what the actions are. He says actions similarly flow from these three modes of knowledge. So sattvic action is that which is done without any attachment, without any duality of raga dvesha, that is attachment or aversion. Niyatam sangarahitam raga dveshatah kritam. So being done without attachment to desire, or that is to say to attachment or aversion, just doing what is correct to be done at any given moment. Whereas Rajasic action is that which is coming forth with a lot of desire. He says, Kamepsu karmasa ahankarena va punaha. So one who is doing with a lot of ego, with a lot of desire, and puts in a lot of effort. He says, Kriyate bahulayasam. So we see this again, how if someone is caught in a very Rajasic way of living, they work hard and they sometimes put in a lot of effort, but all of that is towards a personal goal. And in the process, they leave a lot of damage for others, for the environment, for relationships, for one's own health, and so on. That kind of work is Rajasic work, and Tamasic work, as we know, is that work which is causing only loss, violence, as already said, one who is destructive and one who is simply not able to do anything for others, but also preventing others, but imposing their idea on others through violence. And that kind of militant attitude coming forth from wrong understanding is tamasic. And that in turn defines the agent. So when we have an agent, that is karta, the karta is the agency that's rising within as the doer of the action. The important thing to recognize is that the doer of the action is also a power that's rising within, and there is no personal self that is doing it. So it's a very subtle and important thing to recognize is that agency and doership are two different things. Action requires agency, but it doesn't mean that I am doing the action. To create a story of me as the doer of the action is when the agency is taken over as a personal doer. So that's why Krishna says, Mukta Sango Anahamvadi. He says the right karta satvika uchyate, who is called as a satvika karta. He is the one who doesn't say I, na ahamvadi. So actions happen, And when there is an action that happens, the action is being done. We can use the personal pronoun to as I to refer to, I'm going to do this. But that's held lightly as just a way of referring to the doer of the action in that moment. The important thing to not do, which is where we constantly get caught, is we create a story around the me that is doing actions and having experiences across various moments. So I am doing an action now, then I hold on to this action in the memory as my action, and then later, if there is something that is said about this action, either good or bad, then I take it as a comment on my ability, and therefore I feel flattered or I feel insulted. And then I have another experience that comes forth, then I add that. So, what we do is we connect each moment into a thread called the me. So, we build a story of the me, which is the ahamvadi. So, the opposite of that, this is ahamvadi. The ahamvadi is the one who always is caught in the I and who creates a story of the I through connecting all these actions which are disparate and thinking I am doing it. Whereas in reality, each moment there is an agency that comes forth, and if that is recognized as the very power of action itself, that which responds to what is the agency of the action, and that agency is not a personal self. So that recognition is sattvika. Whereas rajasika is the opposite, which is the one who is so caught in the me as the doer of the action. He says, I am doing this action, I am very good at it, and therefore I am going to do it. And there is a violence in that attitude, there is a aggression, all of that comes forth in the mood of rajas. And the tamasic agent is the one who either doesn't do anything, that is, he shirks his duties and just wedges out and just indulges in laziness, or he engages in violent actions out of a destructive knowledge, as already pointed out. So, all these qualities are there in the tamasic agent. He says, Ayuktaha, Prakritaha, Stabdaha, Shataha. So, these are all various qualities. So, Ayuktaha means one who is not integrated, the one who is completely fragmented. The opposite of that is fragmented. If one is totally fragmented within, and the fragmentation within happens through holding on to various identities. See, because when we hold on to the story of me, then the me also has so many fragments, because there is an identity associated with the position in the family, with work, with religious identity, with nationalistic identity, with political, ideological identity. So, all of these identities are all creating fragments within. And then these various fragments are all competing with each other. And this is how most actions are happening because of this fragmentation within. To be free of this fragmentation is to be integrated, and that is right action. So, on the other hand, to be fragmented, to be caught in misery, therefore, to be constantly procrastinating because of that, and to be lazy, all of this is the quality of the agent who is caught in tamas. And Krishna goes on to say how the intellect, the resolve, the happiness which is sought is all again caught in the same three gunas. So when the larger point for us to recognize is that there is the movement of gunas, which is what is making prakriti or nature. And those gunas are operating at the bodily level, at the mental level, at the energetic level, all the levels. And even through the day, we see this cycle. In the night time, there is more tamas, which causes sleep. In the daytime, there is more rajas, which causes action. In the early morning, there is more sattva. The cycle of seasons has it. The various animals, every being has these different qualities. So we normally think that I am the doer of the action, I have this knowledge, I have this intellect, I have this. The first thing to recognize is that all of this is happening according to the modes of nature. So this was already pointed out in the third chapter itself, where Krishna said, Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashah. All actions happen by the three gunas of nature. So here in the last chapter, for the first portion, half of it, Krishna describes how everything is according to these three modes. And therefore, to recognize this and to come to the mode of sattva is very essential to engage in right action, to have right knowledge, to have the right agency in action, to have the right resolve, and to have the right determination, all of that. So here now he speaks about buddhi, which is intellect. The intellect also is of three types. The buddhi, that is sattvic, is that which has the ability to discern correctly between what is right and wrong, what is right action, what is right non-action, what is duty, what is not our duty, what causes bondage, what causes liberation. All of this is buddhi, which is sattvic. He says, pravritim cha nivritim cha karya akarye bhaya bhaye bandham moksham cha yo veti buddhim sa partha sattviki. So the knowledge, or the wisdom, the discernment that tells me what is right action, what is not to be engaged in, what is to be feared, what is to be not feared. See, there is a place for everything. When there is, for instance, some natural biological response of fear that comes forth because of a situation, let's say there is a snake in front, then one moves away instantly, recognizing that if one foolhardily goes towards it, then it can result in wrong consequences. So there is a place where fear has to be honored, and there is a place where fear has to be let go. Most broadly speaking, what rises biologically as fear has a right place, because the intelligence of the body knows what is right and it gives a signal to say, don't go there. People many times engage in so-called adventure activities, ignoring that natural instinct, and then they court there. Many times they fall to death and so on. Whereas psychological fear is entirely created by the imaginary ego. Fear of talking to, let's say, a group of people, or fear of thinking what they will judge me, fear of what will happen 10 years from now, 5 years from now. All the projections of the mind which are causing fear, anxiety, is the psychological fear. So to be free of psychological fear entirely while honoring the biological response of fear is part of discernment. So he says bhaya, abhaya. One should know when to be which bhaya and when to be in abhaya, fearlessness. So all of this is discernment, to know what is right, what is wrong, what is to be feared, what is to be not feared. This is all sattviki buddhi. Rajasic buddhi means that which doesn't have this discernment. Exactly as we said, Rajasic buddhi is the one who would engage in some kind of, for instance, adventure sport, courting danger, and then they sometimes fall to death and so on. All of this is Rajasic buddhi. Or for instance, mixing dharma and adharma, not knowing what is right, what is wrong, and mixing it up, and not knowing what is right action, going too extreme in anything, and not having the middle way. This is Rajasic Buddhi. And then Tamasic Buddhi is one which is the other extreme, which is it is certain of what is action, which is actually the wrong idea. So there are those who are so convinced with certitude, and therefore in their certitude they are so intolerant, and they are causing a lot of damage to others in the process. So that kind of buddhi, which is caught in certitudes which are completely divisive, such buddhi is tamasic buddhi. And the same thing happens in resolve too. So all of this map to, so if we go through this whole thing, we recognize the important point here is to recognize our own ways in which the prakriti, the nature operates in the body, in the mind. All of this is only to bring forth more self-awareness, because when we are aware of this, for instance, when I am caught in a certitude of some kind, let's say any certitude that my religion alone is the right religion, or my guru alone is the right guru, all of these are certitudes we may carry in a subtle way that is causing division. So to be aware of it is to be free of it. See, the beauty of all of this finally is that awareness is the simple and direct way to be free of everything. The false cannot be turned to truth through any effort. It simply has to be dropped by seeing the false as false. When we are aware of the false, the very awareness makes us drop the false. And when the false is dropped, what is there is the truth that shines forth on its own. So we don't have to seek the truth, we simply have to be aware of the false. This is the underlying important recognition to have through all of this. So when we speak of tamasic buddhi or rajasic buddhi, all of this is only to recognize the false in us. It's not about judging others. It's not about going around changing the world, because the only thing we can change is our own inner attitude. So when we see in ourselves any of this rising certitude, for instance, or partial extreme determinations, which is rajasic, to be aware of it and to let go of it brings forth the sattvic buddhi. Same with the knowledge, as we said, when our knowledge is caught in either partial ideologies or in fear. See, there is people get, it's a beautiful expression where because of fear, even in the religious realm, there is so much fear in religion or created by religion. And that fear makes people therefore get caught in very divisive and very ignorant ways of living. They would think that there are so many superstitions, for example, people may get caught in. And they may think that, oh, I have to do this. If I don't do this, then God will be angry. Or they would say that, oh, if someone says this is what you have to do, then there is so many superstitions the mind can take over, even in the name of religion, if we don't recognize that there is only one abiding reality. There is a small story actually there was a famous saint called Thirugnana Sambandar in South India. And he once went for a debate with the scholars of a different religion. And when he was about to leave, he was told that this is the wrong time of the day because there are all these beliefs people have. And he had a beautiful verse, he said. He wrote at that time, he said, the one who is fully surrendered to the divine, for him every time is the right time. Every place is the right place. So he did not, people otherwise fall for this is the right auspicious time, this is the wrong time, this is the right, this. So there is so many superstitions that can get overlaid if one is not seeing clearly. So because he was caught in sattvic jnana, the jnana, as we said, which sees the oneness of all, he didn't care for all this. So the same thing for later, Bharatiyar also writes a beautiful poem saying how when people are caught in this false idea, then they are afraid all the time of various things. He says, Anji Anji Savar ivar Anjada Porulillai Avanile. He says, those who are caught in religious conditioning also, they get afraid. They are fearful that I may offend him, or I may offend this spirit, or I may offend my own idea of what is right action as dictated by religion, as scriptures say. None of that is necessary if one is rooted in love. If we are rooted in unconditional love, seeing the divine in everyone and everything, that will dictate right action. We don't have to then worry about 1,000 rules and regulations which are only instilling fear in us. So this is the whole point of all this that Krishna speaks of, is to recognize that all of these qualities which are either tamasic or rajasic are only binding us by instilling fear, superstition, anger, judgment, all of this. When we are free of all of this, then action is right, knowledge is right, resolve is right, and everything is right. So in this way, Krishna speaks of the right resolve again, which is sattvic, and the resolve that is rajasic or tamasic, which is always very divisive, violent, angry, and so on. And all of this comes forth as focusing on happiness. And even happiness, Krishna defines, is of three types. The true happiness, which is sattvic, is that which is not something that may seem pleasing in the beginning. So this is something everyone is aware of. That which is very pleasing in the beginning always results in pain in the end. Even at a very physical level, we all know that if we eat a lot of sugary foods, it's very pleasing, but it causes pain. On the other hand, if we eat salads and healthy foods, then it may not be the most pleasing, but it's very healthy. But over time, we may even develop a taste for it, wherein the tongue doesn't care so much for unhealthy foods, but just finds the taste in the sattvic, very simple foods. So sukham, or happiness, is also of three types. So all actions are, of course, motivated by happiness. But if you recognize that true happiness is not through pleasing the senses, pleasing the me finally, because in reality the senses are not even asking for anything. It's the me, the memory that is stored as the egoic identity that is using the senses, using the body for its own pleasure. That's why there is a famous verse. Once Avayar apparently wrote a verse, complaining about the stomach. She said, "Oh stomach, you never get satisfied no matter how much food I give. And then next day you are again hungry. If I'm getting a lot of food, you are not able to take it and keep it for more days. If I give very little food, you complain." It's a nice poem. So this poem was given to Ramana Maharishi much later. But he wrote a poem of the stomach complaining to me. He wrote very nicely. He says, "I am doing fine. You are the one troubling me. You dump with all this unhealthy food. you put all kinds of junk in me, and then you expect me to digest everything. You don't feed me properly. So that's the beauty of it. Is it's the me that is abusing the body. The problem is not the senses, the problem is not the stomach, the problem is not our tongue. The problem is the me that wants to use them to gratify itself. So when we are aware of it and we are free of it, then we can live life in harmony. So that is true happiness. Happiness is not to please the senses, which is to please the me, as we said, but to recognize what is right and holistic. And that holistic action is true happiness. Whereas Rajasic and Tamasic happiness, as we already said, are based on gratification of the false self. So in this way, Krishna says all actions are, and all knowledge, all discernment, everything is colored by the three gunas. And these three gunas are very important, therefore, to recognize. So when we engage in any actions, the action comes out of knowledge and a determination and a resolve and discernment, and out of all this comes forth the agency of action. So at every level, we can see the play of these three gunas and be aware what is operating. And when we are aware of what is operating, then in that awareness, there is freedom. Then that awareness brings forth the right action, which is wisdom, which brings forth various qualities such as regulation of the mind, regulation of the senses, purity, true wisdom, and realization. He says, Shama, Dama, Tapa, Shaucham, Kshantir, Arjavam, Evacha. All of these qualities are the ones that truly define who is a realized being. The realization, which is to abide in Brahman, Brahman is simply the word for the infinite. So the one who is not caught in a finite ego, but recognizes the infinite as the all-pervading only truth, such a being is the one who abides in Brahman, and he has all these qualities. Senses are regulated, mind is regulated, there is honesty, there is clarity, and there is enthusiasm. The important thing to recognize is their enthusiasm without aggression is the defining quality of the one who lives in harmony. So the three broad categories, as we said, sattva, rajas, and tamas, can be broadly seen as enthusiasm, aggression, and laziness. So the one who is lazy or the one who is very aggressively active are both caught in ignorance. But the one who is enthusiastic in action, without falling in the duality of either laziness or aggression, is the right actor. And that right actor is free of the me. And such action results in right action. And by such action, Krishna says one attains perfection. And such perfection then brings about realization of the Supreme. So when one performs works in this way, then such performance of action results in clarity, purity, the mind is pure and the intellect is clear, and thereby realization of the infinite happens effortlessly. So that's why both the cause and the effect. So there is no division between the cause and the effect when we recognize this, that it is the recognition of the infinite all-pervading being that results in right action. And it is the right action that results in abiding in the infinite all-pervading being. So it is like what can be called a positive feedback loop. One reinforces the other. So it's not that we can say, I will first do right action and then one day I'll realize the infinite. This is the division of the mind again, which creates time and steps. In reality, the first step is the last step. That's why it is right action that results in realization, and it's realization that results in right action. So one has to always, therefore, harmonize wisdom, action, and love, which is broadly what is jnana, bhakti, and karma. To look at one as different from the other is again due to the same division. So far Krishna has spoken of what right action is and all the various ways in which to identify and be free of wrong action and the causes of wrong action, and thereby let right action come forth, which is true realization. And the nature of such realization shall be described in the last portion of the chapter, which is the concluding portion of Gita, which we'll see tomorrow. So we have 15 minutes, so we can have any comments or questions we have. But this is a very beautiful portion. Every chapter of Gita has its own beauty. This portion of Gita gives the understanding of our own motives of action at all levels. Action is defined in such detail, all the various aspects that bring forth action, and how to be aware of the inner movements that bring forth action, and to be free of thereby the false motives, the false knowledge, the false discernment, the false resolve, the false pursuit of happiness. And by being free of all this, right action comes forth, which results in harmony for us and for everyone around. The true beauty of living in harmony is that there is peace within and without. We can then be the light that can also lift others. That's why the Buddha said, be a light unto yourself. That is the only thing we can do, is to be a light unto ourselves. And that light can then have its own radiance and its own power.
Action comes from the right decision. So when we're making a decision, how do we know that it is the motivation behind it is sattvic rather than rajasic?
Yeah. So the motivation is determined based on whether the action is rooted in the sense of self-centered me that wants to get something out of it, or it is in the mode of what can I do to serve this situation. Broadly speaking, if we are aware of this, that can actually guide all actions. So in any situation, there is only two ways to respond to it. Normally, unconsciously, everyone goes about with the attitude of what's in it for me. And that is the Rajasic motivation. Whether it's relating to our own closest person in life, or whether it is anyone at work or wherever, we may just look for how can there is a sense of me that is built as a self-image, and that self-image becomes the central factor in seeking motive out of the action. And the self-image will of course be fragmented, because there are multiple self-images created when one is caught in the me. So that's why when one may have a self-image with respect to one's politics, with respect to one's religion, with respect to one's nation, with respect to one's work, and then many times these can be in conflict too. And then this conflict can cause disharmony. So when the self image of me becomes the driving factor as what's in it for me, then that action is rajasic. But on the other hand, if we perceive what is and respond to it fully with love, then that action is sattvic. So when we perceive any situation, any person, anything, the important thing to recognize is therefore the me rising within. So the natural question here would be, how can I be free of this me? Right? And we cannot do anything to be free of the me, because wanting to be free of the me is another aspect of the same me. So the beauty of this is just the awareness is all that's needed. When, for instance, that's why even something as simple as listening is a great way to recognize how am I listening. Am I listening with attention and love, or am I listening out of a sense of me that is judging, acquiring, evaluating, and all of that? And it can be very simple, even at work, even in talking to one's relation. And so when that happens, all that's needed is to be aware of it. We don't have to say, I cannot. If we say that the me should go away, or I cannot, I have to be free of the me, all of this is again the me coming through the back door. So the simple and direct way to end the me is to simply be aware of the me. So if I am very honest and true to myself, then the motivations within are seen clearly. I don't fool myself. If the me rises within with a selfish motive, it is seen. Rather than unconsciously being identified with it and let it drive the action, if we are consciously aware of the me rising, that alone has its power. Then I recognize that the awareness is not corrupted by the me. The me is still rising within awareness. I am aware of the me rising. So it is the truth that is aware of the false. So that's why the false can never seek the truth, but the truth can, by very awareness, remove the false. So when we are aware of our false motivations, our egoic desires, our self-centered goals, just be very aware. So this requires great alertness. When we are alert and aware of these motivations rising within, then we see them drop. That alertness and awareness which drops it then clears the field, and then what remains is just what is. And the response that comes out of that perception of what is, uncorrupted by the me, is right action. See, we spoke of so many different aspects of nature in that operates, whether it be the mind, the intellect, the resolve, and all of that. So the knowledge, for instance, that operates can be sattvic even when the body is not sattvic, in the sense of, for instance, let's say you are very tired in the night and you want to sleep. That does not mean that your knowledge becomes tamasic. The body can be tired and you can honor the body to go to sleep. But there is no reason for us to see. The thing is, everything goes through cycles, but within us, when we are aware, that awareness clears the ground and situates us in sattva inwardly. Outwardly, everything goes through cycle, including the body. The seasons go through cycle, day and night goes through the cycle. the body goes through the cycle. That is true, but that doesn't affect our inner state of being. Doesn't have to. See, the other way around is also true. One can be very early in the morning and be entirely caught in rajas. There are, people who can wake up at 4 in the morning just to go to some activity because they are so motivated by rajas. So the physical movement of the body's energy has its own validity, certainly, and it has to be honored. If we don't sleep honoring the body and we just remain, if we don't give the right sleep, the right rest, all of that, then the body doesn't, the adhishthanam as it's called, the ground is affected by it. But it doesn't have to affect the intellect, it doesn't have to affect the knowledge, the resolve. Even at 10 in the night, even if one is sleepy, one can still have clarity with which one engages with someone, right? There is no reason for us to be caught in ignorant state of mind even when the body is tired. The three modes we are talking about are all within the field of awareness, right? So we can be aware any moment if we are only alert. It's not something that is determined by any of the gunas. See, the gunas are only determining the various aspects that are of the nature of coming and going. Awareness is that which abides, in which everything comes and goes. So when I am aware of whatever rises, then that awareness by its very nature can be free of, and not only free of, but it frees up the identification with anything that rises. And there is no such thing as I can be aware only at this time and not at this time. What is different is the power of conditioning that is there at different times. When the conditioning is very strong, then that conditioning makes it seem like it's very difficult to be aware. So, what is necessary, therefore, is not to worry about whether I can be aware only at certain times, because that's not true at all. What is necessary is to recognize the conditioning that's causing this. If, for instance, there is an intense emotional trigger, then it seems very difficult to be aware at that moment. But that's when you have to be really aware. Because if you are not aware, then the intense emotional trigger can take us in a very wrong way. So, all of this, when we gather together in satsang, when we discuss this, when we sit in meditation, all of this is to bring forth that light of, make that light of awareness shine brightly. That can shine brightly at any time then. And the reason we are not having that power is seemingly because the cloud that covers it is so strong that it seems to be only seen flickeringly once in a while. So when we are more engaged in satsang, when we are more engaged in this inquiry and this contemplation, then that flame is fostered, the flame of awareness. It is always there, but it is, to be more accurate, the clouds are removed. The sun is always shining, but the clouds are removed. And when the clouds are removed, then the sun shines. And then even when a cloud comes, the sun of awareness is there. So this apparent coming and going is not awareness, but it is the intensity of the clouds. And the more we abide as the sun of awareness, then the intensity of the clouds, first of all, weaken, and also whatever the cloud is, we are able to be aware of it. It's not as complex as it sounds. It's very simple. when we are engaging in any action, there is the stimulus of the action in front of us, which is coming in through the senses naturally. But there is also many times a voice in the head that might come up as a commentary on the situation, as a judgment of the situation, as a desire projected based on the situation. And this voice in the head runs our lives when we don't become aware of it. So it's very simple to be aware of the voice in the head and thereby be free of it. That's the first and the most important thing to do. When one is free of this voice in the head, which is the only factor that builds a story of the me, that makes everything about the me, about the false sense of ego, and it comes forth in the form of, as we said, all of this comparing with others, competing, judging, worrying, fearing, anxious, all of these movements that come forth, if we are just alert moment to moment. So it's not, we could say the word practice, it's all question of what, it doesn't matter what word we use, but it's really not a practice in the sense of acquiring anything new. It is just an alert way of living each moment. Every moment is an end unto itself, and if we just remain alert each moment, we'll see that there is a stillness that comes forth, the stillness of being, that is the ground of God, the divine sacred being, is not something. See, we seek this as an experience by going to a place or by engaging in, that's where the word practice comes. People engage in various practices seeking experiences of various kinds. But the true stillness of being, which is the presence of God, comes on its own when we negate the false. So it is by negating the false that the true descends on its own, because the true is in fact already here. It's only clouded by the false. So it's not a practice in the sense of seeking anything, attaining anything. It is just a way of living with great alertness. So even if we go through the day, in even a simple conversation, where is the attention? It's very important. When there is total attention, and then there is naturally love. And that love and attention brings forth right action. But when there is the me rising within as the voice, then that denies love, that denies attention. So to be aware of this voice within as the me and be free of it is to have love and attention flower. And when love and attention flowers, then everything falls in the right place.